So it's neat that this is happening now. And yeah, quite a not a few here in California. So yeah, and like I said, we might do some stuff at the shul through them. So
Shir Hadash did it, so yeah, it
yeah,
works.
yeah, it is a very cool thing to be thinking about, from a practical standpoint, how we're living with the environment and yeah, doing some good stuff. Uh, which is interesting, thinking about the land and Israel and today, as we're going to read Genesis chapter 33, um, what Jewish ownership of land looks like, in particular, what happens in our Torah, which is, well, we'll see. We'll kind of see what happens in our Torah, but there is an interesting issue, which is that for us as Jews, one of the most important things, which we're going to let everybody in, one of the most important things that we have in Judaism is an idea that the land is definitely something that um, while we understand our ownership of land
Oh,
is, it has got a lot of noise. Is it Gail? Yeah. I'm just, I just put it off right for right now. Yeah. Um, that
I'm sorry.
that's okay. That the ownership of land in Judaism is always, it's always our connection with even the Holy Land is an interesting one. And remember that in Israel, you can't own, none of Israel is privately held except for one little piece
Yes.
held by the Rothschild family. You can't own, you can only lease land in Israel. You can't own the land in Israel. And so that's something that we're going to take a look at today. And specifically when it comes to Abraham's life and the first Jews, that when we own land, it's going to turn out to be connected to burial, connected to cemetery. So this is part of life. It's not, not the part of life that we really like talking about, death, but it is part of life. And it is kind of fitting that we're reading this section about Chaye Sarah, the life of Sarah, as it is, well, tonight is my mom's yard site. So it is definitely something to think about. And again, the way we have memories of time connected to loss, to think that, this is now 9 years, it goes by fast in a way. And that I got a call earlier in this week. I told Judith knows this, that I got a call about a yard site that's now the 20th anniversary. We lost a very young woman 20 years ago, Kathy Fromberg, who was instrumental in making sure we started a Todd Shabbat 20 years ago. I mean, 25 years ago, and she passed 20 years ago. And it was weird to think 20 years. And the connection to time, to when we lose somebody. And interestingly, Chaye Sarah, which is what this portion is called because it begins with the first three words, Vayiyu Chaye Sarah, and Sarah's lifetime, is an interesting thing to consider, that Sarah is the only person that we know of the women in the Bible that we know how old she was when she died. We don't get exact um, dates on any other women in the Bible. And and it's not like every man in the Bible we know when they die, but we do know when how old the patriarchs are when they die, all of them. And we do know all the way through, I shouldn't say all the patriarchs. We don't know all the sons of Jacob, how old they were when they died, but we do know how old Joseph was when he died. And we know how old Moses was when he died. And we know how old the kings of Israel and Judah, for those who are reading with us, um, over the Book of Kings and Chronicles, we did get how old those guys were. So we do get ages sometimes, and this one opens with that. Because we haven't read in a few weeks, I just wanted to remind you that the last chapter, or if you weren't here, the last chapter we read about was the Akedah, the near death of Isaac. So we read about a near death, and then it ends with, by the way, a couple of lines about the birth of Rebecca, who's going to be Isaac's wife. So it kind of ends on a happy note, or at least a hopeful note. The chapter does, and then the next line is this line that Sarah's life. And we'll read this. But before we start, and because we've been gone for a while, and it's nice to see everybody here, and we've already posted up on Facebook. Um, I mean, before we jump in, does anybody want to make any general comments or anything that, any new business before we get into the text? I don't want to jump over if something dramatic happened, or if something somebody wants to say before we re, we restart the journey, because it's really kind of a well, there's never a good time to break, but this was not necessarily a bad point in the story to break and to pick up here. Well, I will tell you that this has definitely been on my mind, as I said, because I have a personal. Um, I titled this "One Funeral and a Wedding" instead of "Four Weddings and a Funeral," because there definitely are weddings and funerals mixed up in this. Because the next chapter, and as I said, we were introduced to this by the birth of Rebecca, who's going to be the wife. And then the next chapter is chapter 24, is about Rebecca. And this portion, which begins whenever you say the words like this is the name of the Torah portion, right? This is not just, this is the way we divided the books, if you will. The way we divided the chapters was by a Torah portion, right? A parsha. And so before there were chapters, there were parshas. And this parsha begins with the death of Sarah, chapter 23, but most of the chapter, the vast majority of the chapters, chapter 24 and 25, is about, and it's a very long chapter, by the way, chapter 24. It's the longest chapter by far in Genesis, is about finding a wife, about another a matriarch that's very important, Rebecca. So it's really, even though it's called Chayei Sarah, in a way, it's really more about the life of Rebecca. But um, it is about weddings and funerals and the way they go back and forth, and um, how we kind of, in some ways, make sense of life through the life cycle events that um, we celebrate. It is an interesting thing that, like, people ask me all the time, how do you deal with doing, now I'm doing 60 or 70 funerals a year. How do you deal with being around that many funerals? Well, I had a funeral Sunday, but Saturday night I had a wedding. And there is a I do get a balance. It's not like it's only funerals. If I only did funerals, it would be hard. But I do get to be part of weddings. I do get to be part of bar mitzvahs and baby namings. And so it's not all this. And I think about how weddings and these kind of simchas really do give people hope, and they give people um, things to look forward to, and perspective, and help get us to the next thing in our lives after we've had a loss. So, in my case, 9 years, and then when my father passed away, also in the summer, 6 years ago. Which it's like, so for me, the summer to some extent is like bookended, or whatever. There's my mom and my dad's yard sites for me, but we didn't go right into a wedding. As some of you know, my daughter Rachel got engaged Thursday after 9 years together with her boyfriend Matt. They got engaged on Thursday, and as that happened, we were in England, and we knew it was going to happen soon, and we were kind of hoping we'd get to see her after. We didn't. We were on our way to the airport when we got the news. But so, I thought about it. For me, you think about, oh, well, I wish my mom was there, I wish my dad was there, wish so and so was there. But it's not like it just happened. But interestingly, for Rachel's fiance, now I can call him Matt, he just lost his grandfather in April, who he's very close to, and he lost his uncle tragically the year before. So for their family, they kept saying, "Oh, this has been a really hard year, and now we're having something to celebrate." And so it's interesting. It's not obviously, and I will tell you, they're Italian, so they're kind of, it's almost Jewish, but they're not. But they do have, and I think, as when families have things that they celebrate or they commemorate, we contextualize them, and we juxtapose them, and we go, yeah, well, so and so was born right after so and so died, or we had the wedding, and that kind of took us out of the sadness of the loss and
I
of
always think of that psalm, when it tears will, what I can't remember, and tears will reap joy.
yeah, yeah,
Read it?
those who
Those who
who
sow in
sow in
tears will
tears
reap
will
in
reap in
joy.
joy, which is
Yes.
from Psalms. We played it when we read it, the song, the version that Debbie Friedman wrote. But specifically those events that we have in our life cycle events, we still do that. And again, I will tell you from experience, it's not just Jews who do that. Um, I think we, one of the ways that we, and one of the reasons why we need to celebrate is to kind of be able to have that, um, to have those milestones in life that allow us to also find times to celebrate and to say, yeah, this is part of life. So when they happen near each other, as they do right now, it's one of those things where you go, oh yeah, this is the life cycle. And let's take a look. We'll start reading this amazing story of, and we will talk about today. We're only going to talk about chapter 23. We'll talk this. The interesting thing about this story is that it actually, from the emotional and psychological standpoint of life cycle, it's really important. This portion is also, I will say, one of those portions that we read in Genesis where there are modern consequences to this story that are playing out and have played out over the last, well, few thousand years, but definitely over the last 80 years. There are things that are connected to this story that are pretty important, pretty consequential for the history of Israel, for the history of religion, for that matter. And so we will, yeah, I I will tell you that this is there's a lot here. So let's take a look. Let's get started in Chaye Sarah, in the life of Sarah. And again, even though we've been gone for a few weeks, I hope everyone's reinvigorated and feeling good. And please do not hesitate to jump in and come in with a thought or two as we read this section. So I don't know, Rosemary, since you're with us and we're here bright and early, would you like to start us with Sarah's lifetime?
Sarah's lifetime, the span of Sarah's life, came to 127 years. Sarah died in Kiryat Arba, now Hebron, in the land of Canaan, and Abraham proceeded to mourn for Sarah and to bewail her.
So let's just stop on just this first couple lines. There's a lot to say here. There's a lot to read into even this first line, right? Um, First of all, it's been very well commentated on and reflected on in many divrei Torah. This is a time, by the way, when we read Chaye Sarah, that we dedicate ourselves to the mitzvah of burial, because Abraham is going to take care of now burying his wife. And so it's a time when the Jewish community would oftentimes raise money for cemeteries, for the Chevra Kadisha societies, for the make sure that Jews could take care of their loved ones. So, uh, Gail, you might remember this. A few years ago, Elizabeth, your daughter, helped create a fund so that people who um, needed burial could have a burial, even if they didn't have money. And so while we don't have money in that fund right now, we did actually, she actually asked me for a friend that they needed to have some help with burial. And, we used the discretionary fund for it. But the mitzvah of burial, and it was not a person who is Jewish, actually. It doesn't have, we don't, I mean, I think our community would say if anybody needs help with burial that we can help out with, we do it. But we actually dedicated, years ago, we actually dedicated the fund in 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 um in memory of um her baby, and did a burial fund, and will continue to bury people who pass away, um if they if they need help. And this is this is something that our synagogue is not the only place that's done that. I mean, throughout Jewish history, this Parsha week, which is usually in November, is when the people in the community would ask for people for money. So, um, um, but look at the line. Sarah's life doesn't say Sarah's death. And this also comes from this idea that in Judaism, when we talk about someone's life, we don't focus on their death. That when we talk about even just about somebody's, whoever it is, they don't have to be Sarah, it can be anybody in your life, that rather than say somebody died at 127, we say they lived to be 127. The semantics are important because we affirm the life that they had, not the fact that they died at a certain age, but that they lived. And the concept of chaye, the life, you know, that was chaye Sarah, and it says it again at the end. This was the life of Sarah. So the emphasis is on life, not on death. And it says that she died in Kiryat Arba, which is also known as Hebron. So it tells you that there's an earlier name for the city. There's speculation and commentary on why was it called Kiryat Arba, which means the town of the four. Maybe there were four people who founded the town. Maybe there was a guy named Arba who was the guy that the town was named after. Not that it was four, but that there was one guy named Arba. But I mean, again, this is where she died, and this is where she's going to be buried, because they're not going to bury her in another place where Avraham lived, because we know that Avraham also lived in Beersheba. He lived in other places. He lived in a region that covered a lot of miles, but this is where she was when she died, and that's where they're going to bury her. Anybody else want to comment on the unusual language of this? How about the unusual script on this? I'll give you a little clue. If you read Hebrew, you can see something weird. In line 2. Anybody?
You got a little
The
blue
cough
letter.
is smaller, yeah.
We got a mini cough, miniature cough right here, right?
Yeah.
In the word for to cry for. So there's a lot of commentary on that, because whenever you have a weird letter in the Bible, you got to say, why is it little? And so there's commentary on why it's a cough, right? Which is the 20th letter. Well, no, it's the number 20, rephrase that. It's the number 20 in Gematria. But there's also commentary on the fact that the fact that it's little, the letter is small, shows that either Avraham feels small because his beloved wife dies, so he feels small, or another commentary, a different direction, kind of, is that he diminished the wailing or the feeling that he had because he had to be there for his family and that he had to show himself as a leader and couldn't be fully expressive. There's kind of two different ways of looking at it, if you will. One that it was devastating. He became like a little man after that, or that he made himself not as upset as he could have been, or as he felt. But there are two verbs used here, right? That he mourns her, lispod, and also leave kota, that he cries for her. And people have pointed out that like those are two actions, or those are two verbs. He didn't just cry for her, he mourned for her, and he cried for her. And a lot of commentary on that, right? The need to mourn for somebody is not necessarily the same as crying for them. How are they different? Like, what's the difference? What's the difference between mourning and crying? There are two words. I mean, the word we
You
use,
mourned for a long time.
yeah. The interesting thing is that that's the word that's used first. So lispod is the verb, and the root, the shoresh, is the same word we use for hesped, which is a eulogy. If you will, it might be considered the conscious reflection on losing somebody.
Well,
And then to bewail, to cry, is the emotional outpouring that almost defies rational explanation, that there's no thought in it. I'm just crying. I'm just upset. I'm just an emotional wreck. I'm not thinking about it. I'm not thinking about the person's legacy. I'm not thinking about their life. I'm not thinking about all the good things in their life. I'm just crying.
you could also say it's the physical, the crying versus the intellectual, to use slightly different words.
Yeah.
Is the olive chota, is that without the kaf? Does it mean anything?
No, it's not.
Does
It's
it does
yeah.
it change
The
the root
the
or
leave
anything?
the leave ta
Yeah.
doesn't wouldn't. It's not a word by itself. Leave ta. Uh,
Why does it
but it's
start with a vav? Why does almost everything, there's so many vowels?
because it's and it's not just we don't always translate the ands.
Oh, it's a connecting, right? It
Yeah.
connects, and
Yeah.
I
So
get
it could be and, it can be to, it can be
yeah.
um, it's everywhere. But vav, every line in the Torah begins with almost with a vav, right?
Yeah,
Because it's the connector, so it's always there.
I get it.
Um, yeah, I mean, sometimes we're like, do we really need every? And they don't translate it. Like vat tamat sarah, it doesn't say and Sarah died in Kiryat Arba. It just says Sarah died. There's a new idea, and
So is it a
and
placement maybe when you write the Torah? Does it make a line?
no, but it does. When people look at the letters of the Torah, even a little tiny letter, every letter counts, right? So yes,
Right.
every letter, but it's biblical Hebrew. I mean, it is how let me rephrase it. It is it's the major difference. Well, yes, it's by far the major difference. The major difference between, from a functional standpoint, between biblical Hebrew and modern Hebrew is the vav. And we don't use vavs in modern Hebrew to connect, or to tell a story, or to newspaper article or whatever. I mean, a sentence, we don't use vav.
But does it actually
Though
help
I
with
though
the
I though
Torah?
I will tell you that they do use it in Hebrew even today. Modern Hebrew does use the vav, and or whatever you want to call it, the connecting word, a lot more than other languages, or at least it's more than English. I shouldn't say more than every language. I don't know every language, but I do know that when I hear Israelis speaking Hebrew, a lot of time you go, "Veh," you're like, it's just, "Veh," and
Yeah.
it's like you're like, and you're gonna say what now? So yeah, the vav does hang still a lot, but it's not like biblical Hebrew. Biblical Hebrew, it's every sentence.
Well, in the is it something maybe the scribe did to make it long
No,
in a
no,
no?
no. It's just it's the grammar. It's the biblical grammar.
Okay.
It's the
Okay.
structure. of grammar in biblical Hebrew. It's like that was they didn't think about it. It was not a conscious effort, scribal or a decision to do it. They just did it, you know.
Yeah.
And again, Vayikam, the next sentence begins, then Avraham rose. Um, you could also, like, if there was no Vav, maybe they would have just said Avraham rose. And so there are other words we use besides and when we're translating the Vav. And yeah, I don't know enough about grammar to tell you why it is the way it is, but it's not a scribal decision, and it does force translational decisions that are sometimes that over encumbering in the fact that, like, yeah, do we have to translate that? Do we have to hold that Vav? So anyways, this is a really powerful line though, that Avraham mourns and bewails her. And, like, you wonder, like, is does the mourning period, you can make the argument, is going to come to an end, but not the crying period. The emotion will never go away. And so that's another, like, maybe more modern commentary that, like, and he had to get the mourning done before he could even bewail her, like, you had to do
I
the
think it's the opposite. You're not crying as
maybe.
much, but you're mourning still in your
I
heart.
don't know.
Well, but the mourning has rules or structure. If
Yes.
not rules, but it has structure, especially in Judaism, but in a lot of religions, there's a structure to
And
Yeah.
that really
do.
helps.
It helps, right? But the
Yeah.
crying is not structured.
I see.
Yeah, and it's not, and I think Judith's point is, to some extent, like, the ritual is the lispod, and the mourning, the wailing, is just whatever, whenever it happens, and it's going to happen. And again, normally, we oftentimes we'll do a unveiling, and we'll do something like a year later, or maybe we'll do something 20 years later or 10 years later. But generally speaking, we don't mourn people like on their anniversary. We light a candle. There's definitely a ritual. I think, I was thinking about it today. I'm going to go light my candle, but you cry. You could cry anytime. Again, you could make the argument, well, I'm mourning, I'm not crying. But mourning is really, I think, as Judith said, it's more of the ritual. It's more of the formal process of, like, this is what I'm doing, and when I'm doing it, I'm doing a shiva, I'm doing a shloshim, and then and that's why, again, the word lispod is not a very common word in Hebrew for mourning. It's not even like the normal, like, we don't even use that word, by the way. Like, if you think about it, when we talk about mourning somebody, we use the word score or score, right? We use the word remember. We don't use the word mourn. And so it is really much more of a formal structure. And again, maybe one could also argue that we don't use the word cry or bewail after a certain point, where we would go, well, that's the time that you were crying, and now you're remembering, right? And so that is really the the maybe the Hebrew is the, we think about the score or you score, that's the word that we use when we're talking about it a year later or 10 years later. But we'll talk about this, though, because again, it actually is going to come up in when Jacob's talking about Rachel, about her death, that he was still mourning her. So it's an interesting thing to think about, how we remember, and the fact that, yeah, sometimes we just cry when we're thinking about somebody, and there's no rhyme or reason for it, just a feeling. And yeah, they're both there. They're both part of the process of loss. All right, so think about this, because all of this is happening now in this next line.
Then Abraham rose from beside his dad and spoke to the Hittites, saying, I am a resident alien among you. Sell me a burial site among you, that I may remove my dead for burial.
So it says he went to the Hittites, who are sometimes used synonymously with the Canaanites. sometimes they're called Hittites and sometimes they're called Canaanites. Um, it's an interesting, like why does one author like? By the way, we generally say this is the P author, but you know, is there significance in not calling them um, Canaanites and calling them um, Hittites? Well, look, it just used in the line before it said Eretz Canaan, so it's not like the guy can't. And by the way, this is not. Nobody says this is different authors' hands. This is like most biblical scholars say. This is all written by one person, one story, etc. But so they can use the word Canaan, but they didn't call them Bnei Canaan. They didn't call them Canaani. They called them Bnei Chet. They called them Hittites. So um, yeah, this is this is who he goes to, the people who control the land at the time. Now we already know Abraham's been promised for several chapters now, 10 chapters. This is your land. Yet he doesn't just bury his dead. He goes to the people who live in that area and says to them, I am a resident alien among you. He doesn't say, God promised me this land. He says, I'm a resident alien, which is kind of like, I don't really fully belong here. I mean, I have a place, I have my area, but do I really? I'm a ger v'toshav. I'm not exactly here.
Not quite politically correct, huh?
Uh-uh. So what do you think of that? What do you think about the fact that he identifies himself to these people? And again, we've already been told several times, this is his land, but he doesn't do it. Instead, he's going to buy the land. He says, sell me a burial site. So he doesn't say, hey, I can bury my family wherever I want. He actually buys it. Now, the midrash on this, of course, is that this is one of a few places in the Torah where our ancestors buy the land, and there's no question the Torah essentially right now for the next few verses is not. It's we got a lot of lines. We got a lot of mileage out of the first few lines here. A lot of inspiration. A lot. What we're about to read is a negotiation. It is a very formal negotiation in the Torah that is, I mean, you will derive things from anything, but it's a very straightforward negotiation that the Bible preserved because, as our ancestors have said for a long time, nobody can ever say that we don't own this space. We bought this space, and we will get to this at the end. This is our place. This is our spot, and we bought it. Even if we were given it, we have claim to this, and the Torah has the claim. So Abraham kind of establishing, by the way, that doesn't really belong here. One can make the argument. Isn't that the Jewish condition for the next several thousand years, that even when we feel really at home, are we really at home? Like, this is really our place, right? Some of us just got back from Poland, where Jews lived for 1,000 years, and we don't even have the cemeteries anymore. Most of them were destroyed. There are some still, but one can make the argument Poland is one big Jewish graveyard, and a lot of them don't have headstones. The vast majority of them don't have headstones. So, do we really have a place where we're fully home? I mean, obviously, Israel is a place where we're going to buy this, but for most of Jewish history, for most of our ancestors, for most of our family's lineage on this earth, we've never really been at home for most of our lives. And
It
there's
just
that.
tells me he wants to make a monument that it won't be cultivated by someone else, or it's his land. You know what I mean? They acknowledge that it's his land. That's why he's buying it.
Of course, but Avraham by this point is roughly 127 too.
Yeah.
He's not a kid, and he's still at a point where he doesn't feel anything more in this area more than a resident alien, or at least that's what he says he is.
Yeah.
And that, by the way, in itself is an interesting message, which is if Abraham feels this way about himself in the land that God promised him, is there a sense that even like this isn't really even about land? This is a feeling, and Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, the former chief rabbi of UK, who was a brilliant writer, brilliant, thoughtful person, said that, that as Jews and as people, really, anybody of faith, there's always a sense that if you really have faith, that doesn't mean that you're 100% sure that everything's going to work out right. On the contrary, like there's always a feeling like I'm not sure. I'm not 100% sure. Faith only works if there's some doubt. And Abraham, even at this stage, doesn't seem fully sure that he really does belong. And I don't know that that's like that anybody ever gets that assurance. If Abraham doesn't get that assurance, like why should we? But again, some people have said this is also kind of reflective of the Jewish experience of all time. Remember something too. The first thing that every Jewish community did, whether they were in Poland or whether they were here in the United States, the very first thing the Jewish community did before they built a synagogue, before they built a school, is they built a cemetery. So you can go to little places out in the middle of nowhere and you'll find a Jewish cemetery. And, I'm not a big believer and we just came back from Poland to be at some of the graves of the great rabbis, the great sages of Hasidism, the seer of Lublin. We were at the Ramah synagogue in Krakow, remembering Moshe Isserles, one of the great Jewish legal scholars. And people come there and they pray. They throw notes on the ohel on their tombs. I'm not a big advocate for that, but I am a big advocate for visiting Jewish cemeteries to understand that, like everywhere we went, that's the place that's a testament to our presence. Even if the synagogue was burned down, even if the synagogue, it was been turned into a museum or a factory or a whatever. But
Well, but
the cemetery.
in anthropology, though, also they talk about how a civilization becomes a civilization, if you will, by when they have death rituals. That
Yeah.
establishment of death rituals is like a step, because it's a step beyond hunting and gathering, right? It's a step beyond survival, and it's recognizing
Oh
stage
yeah.
of life.
I mean,
So
anthropologists and sociologists and historians and archaeologists all will look
it's huge.
at death and burial rituals as like a statement of what the values of the people are,
Yeah.
how they buried, what they buried with. But the interesting thing from the Jewish standpoint is that the space, the place of burial, creating a Jewish cemetery was so important because people needed to know that when they died, they would be laid to rest, they would be at peace wherever they were. And if God forbid somebody died on the road or whatever, and they need to be buried, they would be buried if they were Jewish, they could be buried where that Jewish community was, and they would be buried there. And so it's a it is you're right from the sociological standpoint, and from the Jewish standpoint, it just shows the value of making sure that somebody could be given a dignified burial. That was like the testament to what our values were, that we were going to do that. So to
Where
this
does
day,
that diver? I think it's Diver Evrahim. These are the things. One of the things is to build a cemetery.
yeah, yeah. So one
Where
of
does that
the
come from? Is that Pirkei
that's
Avot or
that's from the Mishnah. Yeah, that's from the Mishnah. That the things that we do as Jews is one of them is burying the dead.
the dead?
So
We want a cemetery.
when Abraham says it to the Canaanites, he says that I may remove my dead for burial, right? So he's saying to them, hey, and he says it in a very kind of like matter of fact way. He doesn't say, "Hey, my wife died. I need to bury her somewhere. Please, can I have a place for my wife?" He makes it not about his wife. He makes it about like his responsibility, and to some extent, not just for him, but like the implication is that our this will be the place where our family buries themselves. Like this is going to be the place. This is a Ahuzat Kever. The word Kever means grave, but Ahuzat in Hebrew means like legacy. It's my holding, you know? My holding is the grave. And it's not my dead. It's 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 you know what I mean. It's not a dead person. It's my theoretically, no, this will not be the only person who'll be buried there
On space.
because he knows he's buying his cemetery plot too. So we're we're about to get into the negotiation. This is all very like every one of these first four lines is got something. I mean, I didn't even like, there's this one, Vayikam Avraham, the Avraham got up, right? Which means like, physically he was laid low, but he was also emotionally erect, but he got up and he went to the Hittites and said, "Hey, I got to take care of this." So there's the business of burial here too, which again, as emotionally draining as this is, I actually get, I gotta do the business of this. So this is now the business. Again, Sarah lived this life that was not always easy. You know, she leaves home, there's famine, she goes to Egypt, she winds up with Pharaoh, she winds up with Abimelech. I mean, constant travel, and then there's the whole thing with Ishmael and Hagar, and it's not like an easy life. She didn't have an easy life, and you know, here is she's being laid to rest. There's the laying to rest, and then there's also again the mourning for her and conceiving and thinking about her life, right? And um it's pretty wild. Some things just don't change, right? These things will always kind of be with us in life and in death. So um let's take a look at the business, if you will. Now this is the worst part about burial, which is we got to get down to business. There's a negotiation. And there is, by the way, unfortunately, when anyone walks into a cemetery or a mortuary nowadays, no matter what you paid for, there's always, you didn't pay for this. And
Hmm.
it's never fun. But yeah, this is even worse because they don't
Mark,
have a plot. Yes.
could you also look at the purchase of land as opposed to saying, I mean, realistically, I could walk up to somebody and say, God gave me your $5 million mansion, so I'm taking it. Right? So Abraham recognizes maybe that God's going to do it, but maybe I should make nice with my neighbors, not to get political or anything, but maybe I should make nice with my neighbors and buy a little bit to show them that I don't know, I belong here also.
Well, well, yeah, I mean, we would say that again, the commentators all said, "Hey, this is to show that no matter what you say, and you can say that God didn't promise us this area, we will get to this because this idea of this being our tomb is a major issue to this day. I mean, people have died recently over this. This isn't theoretical. Who owns this? And one could make the argument, yeah, you're right. I think you're right that this is to make nice with the neighbors, but this is not over by any stretch of the imagination. Like tomorrow, tomorrow, today, right now, if while we're talking, there was an outbreak of violence at the Cave of the Patriarchs right now, I would not be shocked at all. As much as I would not be shocked if there was an earthquake right now in California, there would not be any surprise in my voice. If it would be tragic, I'd be sad, but I would not be shocked.
Haven't they just done a major overhaul to that Abraham's
They've done they I wouldn't say it's a major overhaul. We'll talk about it when we get to it, I promise you.
Okay.
But let's take a look at the negotiation. This is the not I didn't tell you one other thing, which I don't want to skip over because it is important before we leave these verses. We read that, and some of you know that I had to say this, and I kind of said it a few weeks ago when we finished the story of the Akedah. Why does Sarah die now, right? Why is she dying now? By the way, Abraham doesn't die now, anywhere close to now. Abraham's got another like life that he's going to live after this, which we'll get to, and we'll get to it, and when we get to it, you'd be like, oh my God, what, this guy is still running around having kids. Yeah, there's kids on the horizon after this. Weird. Like we don't talk about it a lot. You know, our great grandfather Abraham running around and having babies after his beloved wife died. Yeah, but why again is this connected to the previous story? Well, the story goes that as Abraham was walking back by himself, right? There's no Isaac, right? He's not walking back. So he says, Abraham returned to his servants, they departed to Beersheba, and Abraham stayed in Beersheba, which by the way, it's like he's in Beersheba. Why is she dying in Kiryat Arba? Which is not that far away, but you know, it's not the same town. But the
When you
Midrash,
don't
of
have a
course,
tour bus, it's far.
no, it's not. It's not, yes. It's not that. It's not. Yeah. Anyways, they're different regions. One's the Negev and one is the Hebron is in the mountains still. It's the very far south of the Judean hills. So so the story is that Abraham returns from this area, comes to Beersheba or to Kiryat Arba where she is, eventually gets there. And when Sarah sees Avram coming back by himself, Satan, by the way, Satan now in the Midrash is starting to not just be the prosecuting attorney, which is what he started out as, right? In the Torah, Satan really only does one thing we would say is kind of evil or you know, kind of proactively evil is he gets in the second version in the Chronicles version of David's life, Satan encourages David to do a census, which causes damage and loss of life, massive loss of life, and Satan is kind of blamed for that, which is a weird. Some people say kind of an indication of a later authorship to this, that by this point Satan is not just doing what he does in Job, which is tell God all the bad things that people are doing. Now he's actually making people or encouraging people to do bad stuff. But the Midrash goes, again, this is not in the Torah, the Midrash that connects this says that Satan says to Sarah, Abraham killed Isaac, he sacrificed him, he did sacrifice him, he's gone. And Sarah believes it. Sarah just gives up the ghost, if you will, when she sees Abraham coming back by himself. So she doesn't even have a chance to ask Abraham or to confirm it because she sees Abraham by himself and she dies. So Satan kind of gave her a heart attack, if you will. So that is one of the midrashim about why Sarah died in the first place. And if that is the case, if it happens like at the same time, that does mean that Isaac was 37 when this Akedah happens. So that would place Isaac, as an older gentleman when this happens and not a little kid. It is not in the Torah. It is, you can definitely read this as not connected. This could happen many, many years after the Akedah. But the rabbis like the connection. They like the fact that this happened right after. And so it does in this story. So again, the author of this is a different author than this author. This is the priestly author that's writing Chayei Sarah, but I just want to share that midrash with you. It's a well-known midrash, and it kind of reflects this idea that Sarah doesn't really know what, well, she knows what Abraham's capable of doing, and she knows that if God told him to do it, that he would do it. So the son that she's been waiting for her whole life, she thinks is dead, which is really tragic. I mean, the ramifications of that midrash are Sarah dies thinking that her son is dead. It's terrible. It's a terrible story. But yeah, it's the midrash. All right. So back to the negotiation. Here's the negotiation with the Hittites, the Canaanites. Here we go.
And the Hittites replied to Abraham, saying to him, Hear us, my lord. You are the elect of God among us. Bury your dead in the choicest of our burial places. None of us will withhold his burial place from you for burying your dead. Thereupon Abraham bowed low to the people of the land, the Hittites, and he said to them, If it is your wish that I remove my dead for burial, you must agree to intercede for me with Ephron, son of Zohar.
So that is the dude that he wants to buy from. So first of all, they say to him, whatever you want, Abraham. We know that God is on your side. Everybody knows how amazing you are. Anything you want. And he says, okay, well, then talk to Ephron. It's Ephron's area that I want.
Let him sell me the cave of Machpelah that he owns, which is at the edge of his land. Let him sell it to me at the full price for the burial site in your midst. Ephron was present among the Hittites. So Ephron the Hittite answered Abraham in the hearing of the Hittites, all who entered the gates of his town, saying, No, my lord, hear me. I give you the field, and I give you the cave that is in it. I give it to you in the presence of my people. Bury your dead.
Yeah, so Abraham says what he wants. He wants it. He says it's in a cave. It's a cave that he wants. He's not just burying them in the ground, he's burying them in a cave in the ground. The cave is going to be the burial place. The cave is called Machpelah. We're not exactly sure why it's called Machpelah. The Hebrew, well, the tradition is it's connected to the Hebrew word for a double a double wide. No, it's a double tomb. So it's either a two-story tomb, a two-story cave, or it's two chambers, one and then the other. So the understanding was that somehow this is a cave that has a tomb. And again, according to Abraham, this is like, it's not in the main part of his field, but this is where I can, this is where I would like to bury. Okay. And Ephron says, take it. I give it to you. It's yours. You don't need to pay.
Then Abraham bowed low before the people of the land and spoke to Ephron in the hearing of the people of the land, saying, If only you would hear me out, let me pay the price of the land, accept it from me, that I may bury my dead there.
He basically says, I'm not going to do it unless I buy it. Right? And he says, and this in front of witnesses.
And Ephron replied to Abraham, saying to him, My lord, do hear me. A piece of land worth 400 shekels of silver. What is that between you and me? Go and bury your dead.
So this is how Abraham
I
knows.
see these guys like, the card table or something.
No, this is the way people do this. So, you want to tell me how much it's worth? Oh, no, it's not. It's nothing. So 400 shekels, by the way, it seems like it's a lot of money. It actually, based on some of the archaeological evidence that we have now from this period and from, some of the texts that we found, Canaanite texts, that this is like, this is a normal price. This isn't ridiculous amount of money. It's a fair price. It's a price within the realm of inflation and land values at that time that we found Canaanite texts that yeah, this is a lot, but it's not overpay. He's not overpaying, and it's not. This would be a normal amount for this. So again, he's still saying you don't need to pay me, but he told him how much it's worth. So Abraham hears that.
Abraham accepted Ephron's terms. Abraham paid out to Ephron the money that he had named in the hearing of the Hittites, 400 shekels of silver at the going merchant's rate. So Ephron's land in Machpelah, near Mamre, the field with its cave and all the trees anywhere within the confines of that field, passed to Abraham as his possession in the presence of the Hittites of the assembly in his town's gate.
So we've got a deal. We've got a deal. We've got a deal, and it's done in front of witnesses. He owns it. He owns the field. He owns the cave in the field. And as far as anything we have in the Bible, this is the only thing that Abraham owns. He's a nomad. He doesn't own any other place in the land of Israel except for this, the place where he buries his family, the place where he'll be buried. Now, again, there's witnesses. Everyone sees it. But there is something to be said here because nomads, Bedouin, for example, to this day, they don't buy cemeteries. They bury their dead where they die quickly, and as they do in the Middle East, not with a lot of waiting and preparation and anything else. They bury the person, and that's it. This is not what nomads generally did. They didn't have cemeteries. So Abraham, to some extent, is saying, yeah, I might be a nomad. That might be my way, and that might be the way that I'm going to die. But it's not always going to be that way. So he is establishing a firm presence in the land. But the first presence in the land, the first thing is the cemetery. And so to some extent, like if somebody asked, what is the first piece of land that the Jewish people owned in the land of Israel? It's Machpelah. It's the cave, the cemetery.
Isn't that the first thing that we do too? Is to get a cemetery and we start up?
So I said the first thing we do when a Jewish community establishes itself is build a cemetery.
And then a mikvah? Then we need a mikvah?
Mikvah and school and all those other things. But first, so I want to just remind people that again, we're going to talk about, I'm going to show you some pictures of what this looks like today. But Avram didn't negotiate. This isn't really a negotiation. I mean, it is from the standpoint that they said, no, just take it. And he says, no, I'm paying for it. But he doesn't, once they establish a price, he doesn't go, well, maybe it's not worth 400. Give me, I'll give you 300 for it. He doesn't negotiate. He just pays what's asked. And this is also part of the understanding that no one can say that Abraham didn't pay full price for it. Full price established by Ephron. Yeah. Right. No one's ever going to say he Jewed him down. Right. And that's one of the interesting things that we get as Jews is we'll get this, to some extent, we revel in the fact that we paid a fair price for something. But this idea that people look at us like we're these negotiators who, will not, you're not going to be able to have an easy negotiation with a Jewish person. I mean, that's at least from the standpoint of what we have in the Bible. The first Jew doesn't negotiate at all. You can make the case that that's because he's getting a cemetery plot for his family, but I mean, it is what it is. This is what we have. No negotiation. So, and again, in front of witnesses, establishes this. Again, when we finish this, we'll go back and look at Machpelah in a sec. A little bit more.
And then Abraham buried his wife Sarah in the cave of the field of Machpelah, facing Mamre, now Hebron, in the land of Canaan. Thus, the field with its cave passed from the Hittites to Abraham as a burial site.
Yep. And so this is the place, the burial site, that will become known as the, let me just do this real quick. This is the site that to this day is one of the holiest sites in Judaism. It is now going to have a chance to show you this. Let me show you these pictures of what it looks like today. The tomb, as I'm going to show you a few pictures, a few sides of it. Here we go. So this is what Hebron looks like today. This is the town, the city. And this is the city of Hebron. And here is the cave of, or here's Machpelah. Here's the burial site from the outside. Okay. Here's another side view. And here is inside it. I will tell you, I have not been there in about 35, 40 years. I've taken 11 groups to Israel since 93, mostly through Temple Beth Ami, but a couple other little groups. I have not stepped foot in that building in the last 30 something years, 30, maybe 40 years now.
I was there in the 70s.
Yeah. I will not take people there because, quite frankly, I'm not 100% sure, as I said before, that it's a safe, it's always a safe place to be. This is what it looks like inside as far as the layout goes. Inside, I want to show you a couple pictures. Inside what it looks like. Because yeah, I don't think I'm going to be taking people there anytime soon. It's just not, it's too dangerous, and it's not, I can't justify. These are where the different tombs are located on a scale drawing of what it looks like inside. This is what it looks like. These are what each one of those looks like close. You can see the coverings of them are still the ones that were done in green and red during the Islamic period, during the Ottoman period. It is today, it is primarily a mosque. You can tell that by the sides, right? And by the coverings. Who's buried in Machpelah, according to tradition? Abraham, Sarah, Isaac, Rebecca, Jacob, and Leah, not Rachel. Rachel is buried where she died on the road to Bethlehem. So she's not buried there, but all the other 6 patriarchs and matriarchs are buried there according to tradition. Are they buried underneath these cenotaphs, they're called? No, they are not buried there. They're not buried underneath these 6 structures. Otherwise, you can also see it where, I'll show you again. Jewish people are praying there. Okay. This is Yaakov and this is Leah. This is not, by the way, this is a more Jewish area. You can tell this is actually an ark right here. And you can see that these things are locked up, but people put prayers through the metal bars. And you can still see the Islamic iconography on the bars. Right there, see? The crescent star. So, what's going on here in this building? Well, let me tell you a little bit. What we know and what we don't know. These are not where they're buried. These places are not, they're not buried in that space. They're not buried above. This is a cave. And the entrance to the cave, I'll show you a picture of it, is, give me one second. The entrance to the cave is something that we as Jews, we don't go to it, to the cave. Have Jews gone to the cave? Yes. Are they supposed to go to the cave? No, not really. We're not supposed to go into the cave. Let me show you the entrances to the cave. Let's see. Just give me a second. Because this is about the closest to a tour of Machpelah that you'll ever do with me. So this is a canopy over this entrance, this ground entrance, which you can see better here. This is one entrance to the cave. And there's another entrance to the cave. I don't know if there's a picture of it. No, there's not a picture of it. But this is another angle of where you can see where Isaac and Rebecca, I showed you where Jacob and Leah are. This is where Isaac and Rebecca, and you can see like in this area, you have Muslims praying like right there in the middle of the room. This is what it looked like in 1890. Really not that much different. There's a picture of it in 1911. So here's what we know. The site has been attributed as the actual burial site since the Maccabean period. So the Maccabees had a tomb structure there above the cave. King Herod the Great improved on that building and also added to it a structure that's part of the structure is still there, part of his wall around it. When the Christians, the Byzantines started, you can see right here, the Christians actually covered it. They put a basilica, they put a church over it with a roof. And Christians started coming to this site. Okay? During the Arab period, when it was conquered, so the Persians destroyed the church that was there, but at this point, the Persians aren't Muslim. They're still Zoroastrian, so they don't really care about it, though the Jews hoped that they would get it. But when the Muslims came and conquered the Persians and conquered the area, they allowed the synagogues to continue there, but they eventually would build um, their own tomb, their own mosque and structure. During the Crusaders period, they reconquered it and they turned it into a church again. And they also, I want to make it very clear, banned the Jews from using the synagogues. They did not let the Jews pray there. Maimonides goes during the Crusader period. He visits Israel during that period, and he did pray. He did not pray in any kind of synagogue structure there, but he did pray there. Around that time, Benjamin of Tudela, who travels all around the world, or at least the Mediterranean, Asia, lots of places. Benjamin of Tudela was an amazing Jewish adventurer. He goes there and also sees that there is still a place of worship there. It's controlled by the Christians, and Jews can pay to come in there and pray. Eventually, Saladin reconquers the area, and they rebuild it with some of the Islamic style. The cenotaphs that you see that are covered with those green and also some of them are red coverings, those were done during the Ottoman period. This is much of the way that it still exists was the Ottoman period's restoration of it or reconstruction of it around it. When the British came, they controlled it. They allowed Jews and Muslims to come and pray there. And a lot of Jews moved to Hebron. This article doesn't talk about it, but in 1929, there was a massacre of Jews in Hebron, and a lot of Jews left the area because they were afraid. It was controlled by the British during that period. In 1929, it was controlled by the British, but the British did not protect the Jews that were living there from the attacks. It was a really bad massacre. I mean, in the Jewish mind, it was like, we're not safe in this land, at least if we're living in an area that the majority of people are Arab. It was part of the collective consciousness of the Jews who lived in Israel pre-state Israel. Okay. When the Jordanians took control in 1948, they took control of what we call the West Bank. Let me make it really clear.
Excuse me, was this the Grand Mufti that did the massacre?
The Mufti of Jerusalem, no. This was
earlier.
This was done by Arab civilians who went on a rampage and killed the Jews of Hebron. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. The Hebron massacre to some people was like a prequel to October 7th. I mean, I'll just show you real quick. It's not the only time that that this kind of thing happened, but it was August 24th. Yeah, I mean, I mean, you can read more about it. I wasn't necessarily going to talk about the Hebron massacre, but it was really bad. It was really bad. And
how many people were killed?
69 were murdered, and 67 were murdered, and about the same amount were also injured. I mean,
Okay.
some people were, had their limbs hacked off and that kind of thing. So it was not a good scene, and it was part of the feeling like that can't happen again. So in 1948, when Jordan took over, and of course did not allow a Palestinian state to be established, there was no Palestinian state established in these 20 years. Jews were not allowed to go. Okay? In 67, Israel takes control of Hebron, and almost immediately Israel goes into the mosque and into the site and says, "We're going to pray here." Now, there's a very famous scene that happens here, which you can see. The Mufti, the Islamic leader of Hebron, goes to the Israeli forces and surrenders. And the chief rabbi at the time, Shlomo Goren, tells him, "Do not surrender here. This is a place of prayer and peace. Go somewhere else to surrender." So, also part of this story that you should know is the first Jewish person we know of. I don't say she's the only one, because I'm sure there were other people in the previous 1800 years that went into the caves. But Michal Arbel, whose father was the head of the Shin Bet in the area, she went in, and she went into the actual tomb and took pictures for Moshe Dayan, who was obviously the chief of staff at the time, but was also a big archaeologist. Moshe Dayan was like fascinated and really a supporter of Jewish archaeology and recovering Jewish knowledge of these kinds of places. So um, she actually went down underneath and went into the caves. Um, Israel made sure that Jews would be able to pray there. They also made sure that uh, it was also maintained as a mosque, and it is to this day.
What is this humiliating seventh step?
It was you had to bend down in order to get into the cave. So it's a way of humbling yourself, really, more than
I
humiliating
see.
yourself to get down into the cave. Um, so we're not done. Some of you know what happened there in 1990 in 1994. Uh, so Jews, the last time I went there was probably, I want to say 88, maybe earlier, maybe 86, 85. Yeah, it's like 40 years. In 93, Israel went into the Oslo Accords to try to give autonomy to the Palestinians. Um, the next year on Purim, an Israeli named Baruch Goldstein, who was born in Brooklyn and made Aliyah, he went into the cave of Machpelah with a machine gun and murdered 29 Palestinians who were Arabs that were in the mosque. Israel, Paul, was very, I mean, everyone in the leadership, including, Netanyahu, was just kind of the beginning of his political career, condemned it. Everybody condemned it. It was a horrific scene. It was to some extent like one of the worst things, I would say, until calls of genocide lately. The Baruch Goldstein massacre was kind of just held up as this is what crazy Jews will do. And again, it was such an aberration that people really said, "Hey, this isn't like the norm." But I've never felt comfortable taking people there ever since, because I don't think it'll happen again. It hasn't happened again. It's been 32 years and it hasn't happened. And I'm not going to take people there on a holiday like Purim, where, look, Burke Goldstein purposely chose Purim because it's a day where Jews attacked the people that were going to kill them. I mean, we know why he did it. I mean, we know we know what, made him want to do that. But, I won't take people in a situation where, again, it's potentially dangerous. It's also a day, it also requires an entire day to get in and out with the security and getting, your pass and getting accompanied in. To me, it's just, if I'm taking people to Israel for 10 days or even 2 weeks, I can't justify taking people to essentially a cemetery, even if it's our ancestor cemetery, and if it's going to take a whole day. I just can't justify it. So, um, I would tell you this. Um, it's still a flashpoint. It's still an area where, potentially things could get really nasty. Um, but Israel has never stopped people who are Muslim or Christian from praying there. Um, we're the first peoples that have controlled it in 2,000 years that never said, hey, sorry, you can't come here. Now, again, this horrible thing happened there. There's no question that is, if you want to say we're responsible for it, it was a Jew responsible for it. I mean, a horrible thing, but it was not, it did not accompany then any kind of ban on anybody else coming in. And it is essentially, it's primarily run by Muslims. So the Muslim organization, the Waqf, the religious authority that maintains it, essentially, I mean, 81% of the building is controlled by the Muslims.
Do we actually know that there are bones buried there?
No. And again, they're not up top, they'd be underneath.
So it's like King David's tomb. David's not really there.
Well, we don't know for sure. Could they have been buried underneath? I will say this. David's tomb it's not verifiably as old as these. This goes back to the Maccabean period. People were praying here as the tomb 2,000 years ago. Now, again, that would be 1,000 years after they died, but it's possible. And again, it doesn't prove that they're really buried there, but we've found pottery and fragments in that area in the tomb that go back to 2,800 years ago. So it's not 3,000 years ago or 3,500 years ago, which is like how far back we would date Avraham and Sarah, but it goes back a long way. And I would say, of the sites that we say, hey, somebody's buried here, or this is where this happened, I'd say it's more substantiated than some. Definitely more than David's tomb, and definitely more than, like, I mean, it's not a Jewish tomb, but like, there's very little to commend the Church of the Holy Sepulchre as a place where Jesus was, in any sense of the imagination, ever was buried for even a moment. So, there's people who, they don't care. I mean, people don't care that that's not the place, but we don't know, and we have found bone. Well, I shouldn't say we. There were bones that were found in that area, at least attested to, during the Crusader period. Here, I mean, you can read more about it if you want. On the Wikipedia page isn't a bad um, isn't a bad um, place to go to. But according to what happened in 1,000 years ago, um, that they discovered the bodies of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, their shrouds having fallen to pieces, lying propped against the wall. And that's during the Crusader period. I mean, we don't know for sure, but 1,000 years ago, people saw some of the bodies that were there. Then again, there are a lot of bodies, according to this, that other people maybe wanted to be buried there because they found barrels containing bones of people which were taken there as well. So we don't know for sure. I mean, I don't know what to tell you other than that's one of the reasons, another reason why I wouldn't like take people there, because I don't even know if they're really buried there. But even if I did know, I wouldn't risk people's lives to take them to that place. But it's look, how many places in the Bible, how many times in the Bible do we read stories where we're going to say, hey, look, people are like, it's such an intense situation that people will die, and the tension is so real that this isn't a story of where Sarah is really buried. This is a story of people who are filled with passion over this issue of knowing where um, they can, if you will, pay homage to their ancestors. So, you know, I'm only telling you what we know. I'm only going to be, honest with, like, this is what we believe. This is what we know. But I will tell you that um, this is one of the reasons why we don't know where Moses is buried, because we don't want people, according to the Bible, we didn't want to turn it into a place of adoration, a place of worship, and by consequence, a place where people would die. To turn a cemetery into a place where more people would die, that seems to be, at least to me, a perversion of religion, not a affirmation of holiness. It's kind of the worst elements of faith, that people would kill people over where someone was buried. Um, but yeah. And the moral of the story is there will not be a trip to Makbila this coming November. If we go, I don't see that being on the itinerary unless some immense miracle happens where there's a peace treaty and Palestinians and Israelis decide they want to live in peace and share everything that's holy to both. It ain't gonna. We're not going there. So, and it's not because I'm angry about it or sad about it, I just will not risk people's safety to take them to a place that isn't even established for sure as the place where they're buried. And what are you going to do? I mean, I'm going to pray. Every time I say the Amidah, I say Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah. Every time I pray, Leah or Rachel, whatever. Every time I pray, I'm acknowledging my patriarchs and matriarchs and my connection to them wherever I am. I don't have to be in their tomb to. I don't have to be in a tomb to be connected to my ancestors, to the people who I owe my life to. So, with that, I hope that everybody will be well between now and the next time that we get together to read about the marriage of Abraham's son. Get my wife a son. Get my son a wife. Get my son. Get somebody married here, because I can't. Yeah, I don't want to see my son take a wife of the Canaanites. So as much as Abraham gets along with the Canaanites, I don't want to see him married to one of them. So that's what we're going to read about in the next section. And yeah, that's the wedding.
Rabbi,
Yes.
just for those that are local, just a reminder, Thursday,
Thursday
Marston's
is
Dine
Marston.
for TBA.
Yep. And so tomorrow night our Wednesday night class is Jews in space. We're moving away from history for a few weeks. We're going to be talking about Jews and our relationship with the universe and with stars and with maybe a little sci-fi as well. But that's Wednesday night. That's tomorrow night at 7. And then again, Marston's is, I think, breakfast, lunch, and dinner on Thursday.
Yes, it is.
And it's not too early because we're only about 11 days away. for our Alta AC. We're going to be out in Antelope Valley. See, Rosemary, if you still live down here, you could go to a soccer game with us to Lancaster. The Jethawks Stadium is now a soccer stadium, so I'm going to be there. Several of us will be there for, I
Yeah,
hope,
we're
for
going with the Brosowski.
the Alta game. And you know, if you didn't get to go see the World Cup, you get to see Alta. See Alta. It's all good. It's soccer time. Soccer time here in America, and we're going to. And then, like next month, we'll be done. We'll be back to football and baseball and everything else. All right, everybody, take care. It's good seeing y'all, and
Everybody.
we will see you. Thank you, Rosemary. All right, bye bye.